joint gains and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of reclaiming and repurposing and all that kind of stuff going on in the world right now. And reclaiming is different. Reclaiming isn't about repurposing, and it's not about reinventing. It really is something specific. So I kind of looked up the definition, and it has to do with recovering. Recovering something that really was lost, misplaced, or obtaining something in return. So what did we lose that we're trying to reclaim? It's kind of the question. We talk about reclaiming Sunday. We hear that sort of language in at least the gospel. So what was lost? And what are we trying to reclaim? And I think the key to that, we need to reclaim some power on the computer, I think. What we're trying to reclaim and what was lost, if we just kind of narrow it down, is what I would call a relationship. And really it's kind of a communion or a union with God. And we've lost that. We lost that in original sin, really. And let me give you a short example of what I'm talking about. We understand that in the beginning God creates us a particular kind of way. You can move through that if you want. Just to the bottom. You go down. Go down.
Oh, this one?
A little more. Oh, there you go.
All right.
One of the stories in Genesis in the beginning, I love this story, and this is really great for, in particular, the guys to think of. God creates Adam, and he says all things are good, but it's not good that he's alone. And so what does God do as a result of realizing that Adam is alone? He starts to bring him all these animals. Now God knows, because he's God, that none of these animals are going to satisfy Adam. But he brings them to him anyways, which is very curious, right? And so then Adam starts to name them all. Like, this is wonderful. In other words, he starts to have like this relationship with them. You know, to know a name is to have like an intimacy with somebody. And he starts to become intimate with this created world. And through all of this stuff, Adam comes to realize that it's not enough. There's something missing. So that hunger that was there in the beginning, when God made him, to say it's not good that he's alone, God like even increases it by bringing all this other stuff to him. Isn't that an interesting thing that God does? Mm-hmm. Right? And then what he does, after Adam has this tremendous amount of like hunger for this other, he puts him to sleep, and from his side he creates woman. And then finally, bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh, he has somebody now that he can pour himself into. He has really someone that he can have union with. He can have true communion with. He can have a relationship with. And why is that important? Because we're made in the image and likeness of God, and that's what God is actually calling us to be in relationship with him, to be in union with him. And he makes us like that, so we are like that. This is the story of creation. And it's all good at that point. It's so good that the two of those are going to actually make children. So like in 9 months, the love that they share, you're going to have to give them a name. And we start to create just like God. And that's the image of what's actually we're made and designed for. But that's not the end of the story. What comes after this? We hear about this Satan, this person, this angel who was made good, who has chosen to rebel against God. And why does he rebel? In Scripture, it actually gives us a reason why he rebels. Does anybody know what it is? It actually says in Wisdom 2:24 that because of Satan's envy, death enters the world, and those in his grasp experience it. And who is he envious of? It's not God. Because he knows that he can't match God. He is envious of us. He is envious that we are made in the image and likeness of God himself. And he turns and resists the Lord and transforms himself into what we call hate and evil and destruction. It is his very nature. This nature of his is set out to destroy your life. And this is what Adam and Eve, when you hear about them taking a fruit and taking it within inside themselves, choose to participate in this lie, this separation of the relationship and communion from God. This dominion, this kingdom of death and sin is what we live in today. And there is no escaping it. And it's worse than your worst nightmare. This force wants to destroy you. It wants to pull you out of relationship with God for all eternity. It wants to destroy your children. And it doesn't care. Because without understanding this bad news, the good news is just news. The good news is that's not where God leaves us. He does something amazing. What does he do? He sends us his son. And what does his son do? His son reestablishes the communion, right? Like even within his body, he reunites the divinity and humanity that was torn apart because of sin. This dominion, this kingdom, the kingdom, if you think about it, we don't really live in a world where kingdoms and dominion make sense to us. Kingdoms and dominions, if you can imagine, like the walled city, you hear a lot about cities in Scripture. It's a place you can't get out of. It's a place you're stuck into. You're covered by. There is no escaping this. And then Christ comes to set us free from this dominion and kingdom and to bring us into the kingdom of life. And he does this by defeating Satan. And you can see him taking over areas, like he takes over nature. He walks on water. He heals things. All these broken pieces start to come together. He unifies the relationship between humanity and divinity. And finally on the cross, like an ambushed predator, he draws Satan in and finally grabs him and ends his reign on this world. And then invites us to participate in the new life. This new life is what Sunday is all about. Sunday is the summit of the realization of that relationship. Do you see? It's about coming and seeing what the Lord has done for us. It's about saying yes to him every single time. And what he shows us is not just the Eucharist, but how to live our life. How to be in relationship with others. How to be in right relationship with God himself. What's the proper order? How do we really do this? What my wife and I kind of figured out was that's what he wants us to do with each other. To show us how to love one another and to love our kids. Because our mission as a family, my mission is to help her get to heaven. That's my primary mission. And then the next step is to help our kids, if we have them, to become holy and know the Lord, to get to heaven. Then the last outer layer would be to invite my neighbors into this truth as well. That's my vocation as a married person. I never knew that. Like I just thought it was like being a good person. Like trying really hard. Doing the right things. It's way more than that. And I saw on Sunday what the Lord was trying to tell us finally about how he sacrifices his life. How his flesh becomes an instrument of union and communion with one another. What does it really mean to love my spouse? To pour myself into her? Right? So this is the heart of what we discovered. So what we want to do is talk a little bit more about how we then took this kind of really big idea and brought it home. Like, how do you live that out? Like, what does that look like? And how do I get equipped? I think I'll let Shawn talk a little bit about that. Your own table, about how do you keep Sunday holy? Are you keeping it holy? What does it mean to you? What are some of the fruits of your Sunday? And what are some of your challenges? Okay? I'm going to give you 2.5 minutes. Make a better connection, really.
Yeah. So in the beginning, like we were talking about before, it was really a struggle, and really kind of get to the point where you're asking, well, why are we doing this and what are we doing? And it was many times when we'd be at Mass and we'd be in the back, kids are crying, like, what? Did you even hear the homily? Did you even hear the readings? Things like that. So we just started to try to reclaim Sunday on our own because we were asking these questions. We really had to have that moment where we came together and go, okay, what are we doing? And then that's where we wanted to bring it all back around as far as how we reclaim our Sunday. And so we moved from what the obligation was to why it really matters. So.
Yeah, it was, I would say it's almost like a little embarrassing for us because we understand being Catholic, right? There's the obligation and doing the things, but in the midst of just trying to be parents and trying to do this, it just really felt like, not life-giving, but the opposite of that. Just being worn out. It was easier to kind of just stay home. When you start to hear those questions like, well, can I just be home and like worship God at home, or how we feel about this stuff, and just all those kinds of things start to swirl around.
Well, and realizing that we're going to Mass to be fed. We're going there to give our family, as crazy as it is, and the kids are crying and everything, but we bring all of that to the Lord on Sunday. We bring all of that, and then we receive from Him back the grace to go through it again next week. Because without that, without Him, we can't continue to go forward. And so He, it's that cycle where we come to the Lord, He comes to us, we come back to the Lord, He comes to us. And it was, once you start, finally, it takes a while. Let me tell you, it takes a while before you start seeing some fruits of your labor. And it can take years.
Well, and so what the real revelation is that we are a church. See, we thought we were just like passive participants in the churchy thing that we do on the weekend. But what we come to realize is that we are actually a domestic church. Like, our home is a place that needs to look like church. We were the pastors. We were the leadership team. And we had to figure out how is this going to work, where we take the resource and what God's doing and giving us in terms of our mission, how do we appropriate that, and then make our home a place where the virtues and all these kinds of things are alive and lived out. How are we going to equip ourselves to do that? So we realized that was the connection. But the next level is how are we actually going to do that? So I guess we want to talk a little bit about some of the steps that we took, what our typical kind of Sunday looks like now. Just as an example. So one of the things we wanted to make sure is that everybody was on board for Mass. Now, when you have little kids, that's really easy to do, right? You just put them in the car and you make them go. But as your kids get older, and some of you know, it's like, it becomes a real challenge, especially when they start driving or they have jobs, and like, there's a lot of stuff going on. So we had to set some priorities about everyone's going to go together as much as possible. It was on us to place the flag down and say that's going to be what we're going to do. The next thing was what we called Soul Food Sunday. We decided that we were going to trick our kids. This is a really great thing to do. So we trick them with food because they love food and they love going out. And for some reason, what we do as Catholics is we celebrate, right? We always celebrate. It's a celebration. But we knew that if we promised the kids, like afterwards, well, you can pick. We would rotate the responsibility. You pick where we go. And we would go and we would have like a snack or something. But the deal was, and we were going to talk about the readings. So we would go there and they would pick out the food they wanted and then we would talk about the readings. And what we were doing is like a small group process with them. We were teaching them to pay attention at Mass to the readings, to take the readings inside them, to like appropriate that. Like, what does that mean to you? What's the big so what? And then you get to pick the next person who does it next weekend. So the person next weekend would lead the conversation, but they'd also get to pick the food, right? So they were all going for the food, but we were getting them to actually pay attention at Mass and start to take Mass as something that was important to their life that becomes integrated. Right?
Well, and here's an important thing that I learned, and our son has taught us so much, but here's what I learned. So here we have our beautiful teenage son, and then he's 24 now, but he would sit in Mass, and it's like he was asleep. That's by the way. But he would sit in Mass, and it's like, okay, is he even listening? Is he asleep? Is what I would wonder sometimes. Is he sleeping? But we would go out for Soul Food Sunday, and somebody would bring up just like one topic, whether it was like something from the reading, and then our son would have like this amazing litany of things to share in regards to faith and what he had actually heard. And I was thinking that he hadn't heard anything at all, but it was quite amazing to find out how much he had to input, and then also our girls would input as well. So
I know what you did that. So, but and the other thing was it was reciprocal. It wasn't like we were just going down to hear our kids to teach them things. They were teaching us stuff. They were telling us what they heard at the homily, what we didn't hear, or what they heard at the readings that we didn't hear. So that was a big kind of revelation, and it was something that took time and evolved over time. And they got better at it, and it was kind of fun. The next thing is to have family fun and joy. I mean, whenever we were doing things, and we would tell them no, not for this, but yes for this, we wanted to make sure that it made sense. That it was actually a good time, that it was enjoyable, that it was better than what maybe the other thing they wanted to do was. Now, that doesn't always mean that fun gets to be the most important thing, but there was something joyful about being together with family. And I can tell you right now, Every kid that we have needs peace and family. They are overwhelmed with the inundation of messages and phones and all this kind of stuff. I can't tell you how many times I've taken the phone away from my kids and they've thanked me. Because they're so connected to their friends, they don't know how to tell them no. And if they don't respond right away, there's this big problem in their relationship. But if they can say, Dad took my phone away, they're in the clear. So they were actually thanking me for taking their phone away. It was really something special. But so the point, though, is that they hunger for our relationship with them. They hunger to be loved by us as family and to spend time with them and to affirm them. So that's really an important thing. And it's like, have fun. That's our vocation. Guess what? We get to have a lot of fun. We get to go to the parks. We get to go hang out and put Christ in the middle of that stuff all the time. I think it's one of the best parts of our vocation. Praying together as much as possible. We really tried to institute prayer as a way of having this relationship with God. So first of all, we have to model it. So it's one thing just to say prayer around a meal, but we decided to take that to different levels over time. So part of it was just letting them spontaneously pray from watching our example on how to actually pray. And not just run off with the words, but actually what's going on in your heart and how to pray for each other, how to put love into each other. We've gotten to the point now where we're actually praying healing into our own kids, blessing them, praying protection over our kids. That's our responsibility, and we have a right to do that given to us by Christ to bless our families. As a priest, prophet, and king, you have authority over your home to get Satan out of there. He is not allowed in your home. The only power he has in your life is the power you give him, and he's out to take your kids. So if you pray over your kids and teach them how to pray over each other, it's a powerful thing. Just a really quick story. My son, he was going to become a Marine, and about a week or two before he was going down there, he got sick and got this terrible ear infection. He was like, something was coming out of his ear. It was a really bad thing. He went to the doctor, and the doctor looked at his ear and said his eardrum was completely gone. It's a mess. It's chronic. It's going to be a problem. So they sent him to a specialist 2 days later to get some kind of treatment and some medication and all that kind of stuff. Well, we got together in our family because we have a practice now of actually praying over one another, and we prayed over him. I took my daughter's hand, put it on his ear. We just prayed, like, Lord, do whatever you want to do. You have authority, this kind of stuff. He went to the doctor 2 days later, and it was completely healed. It's like, and you can do, like, if you just let God open up and be powerful in your homes, you can start to do that. And that's part of what happens on Sunday, is that bread and wine becomes the body and blood, soul and divinity of Christ. Like, we should be on our knees and on our face when that happens. And then says, go and do this stuff. I put this in you so that you can go into the world and transform it. And that's what we do as families. So that was part of the power that we were trying to take away from our Sunday and put it in our family. To teach our children that God's real, that he shows up, that he has power. And lastly is just kind of relaxing, sharing time, having fun. So that's kind of the basic model of what we've done over the last probably 15 years. We don't always go to Mass at the same time but the cool thing is they'll go on their own. They'll get in their car and they'll drive to Mass. They're taking their friends to Mass. I can't tell you how many times they've taken their friends to Mass without us telling them. Because it's a routine in their life and they do it.
Well, and looking back, again, it's been a long process, and it's still not perfect. It's still evolving, because as our family is growing and our kids are getting married and having boyfriend and girlfriend, and it's like bringing them into it, and it's ever changing. But the great thing about it is Christ is always there. He's always there, and the important part of it is that he's always in you, and the more that you allow him to feed you, the more that you can feed others. It's just overflowing, and it's hard. If you would have asked me probably 10 years ago if I would be up here talking about my family and how awesome, I feel that how far they've come, and I would have never thought this. I would have never ever, because it's a struggle. Young families, it is. It's just hard when you try and you're not sure if it's ever going to be fruitful. But the point of that is just never stop trying, and always go to Christ as your well to feed you and to give you that rest that you need in order to, deal with the challenges that come up with your kids and your family.
And Sunday wasn't just about Sunday. Sunday becomes our way of life. We are Sunday people. We're kingdom people. So the whole week becomes Sunday. It's just Sunday is the source, where we hear that sort of liturgical rhythm that keeps us on point. You know what I mean? Like it changes and moves us through. So it gives you kind of the marker to move, to change, to have different readings, have different seasons, different times in your life. It's really helpful to keep that going. But it ends up being Sunday happens throughout the week. Whenever the kids are ready for prayer, whenever they're ready to take that reading from Sunday and incorporate it now. There were many times when we'd hear the reading, but it didn't apply until Wednesday, because that's when they had the issue, right? And then you're smart enough to say, remember when you had that reading on Sunday? Well, here's what this applies in their life, right? And that's when you make the connection. And then they start to get hungry for more of that rhythm. They want to hear more of that kind of process. So some of the ways that we do this, or learn to do this, was one is just to keep it simple. As family, we have a lot of things moving and grooving, right? So keep it simple. Don't try to set this huge agenda, or know your kids, know your process, work within the framework God has given you, and keep it simple. Another thing is spiritual preparation. It's like you need, it probably went my way, but you need to spend time in the Word, know what Scripture is, know what the Mass readings are, understand the Mass. You know what I mean? Try to figure out how that looks in your family. How are you priest, prophet, and king there? How are you praying with your spouse? Like those kinds of things. Talk about it together. We praying over the readings every single morning. Not always together, but at least we do it in our home the way it works best for us. And that's a big thing. And plan the day. It doesn't have to be extraordinary, but if you know you're going to go to the park, or you know you're going to do a kind of a thing, or you know someone's in charge of the Soul Food Sunday piece or whatever, like you have a little bit of an agenda, and then make sure kind of like everybody knows. One of the things that we're real big on is everybody has a role. We want buy-in. So we're not going to be the parents who like lead the kids by hand to go do everything. They all have to play a role in it. So now they cook dinner, or they plan something, or they clean something, or they're driving us places. They're in charge of driving. You know what I mean? And it changes over time, but they all have to have a responsibility in the Sunday. Well, why is that? Well, because we find that you have to do the work. Like we're demonstrating it to them, and we've done that for a long time since they've been little. But even as they're little and moving up, they need to start to participate in the way that they can. So they can become leaders of the process as well. And that's a big thing that I stick to. And then, of course, attending Mass is a big deal. And then having that fun. And make sure, it can be hard at certain times because the kids are going to want to go in different directions. The culture is pulling you apart. But I think one of the things that's kind of kept us together is it's been really soon, too, that our family experience together was something that our kids started to long for because they saw so much brokenness in their friends' families. And their friends would come over. I've even had my own friends come over and think that we're putting on a show for them or something. And I'm like, no, we're like this all the time. Because we're just loving on each other and being silly and just kind of praising God or whatever, just kind of being normal. And they've never seen that in a Catholic home before. Their home is not like that. And so my kids, even wanting to spend the night at a friend's house, would go there and realize their home isn't like our home. And they would want to be at our home. So that was kind of a big deal. Keep in mind. I'm going to cover this. I'll cover this.
Okay. No, I'll cover it.
Okay, then you cover
Well,
it.
I think we've kind of gone over a lot of that,
Yeah.
though. So, not to just to keep going over the same thing, but it all looks different, right? As far as every situation is kind of different. So we talked about leading and engaging, and kids like to participate in that. So the more that they can help in the leadership, you kind of help them set the stage as they go forward and as they grow up and they become leaders of their family too. So that's really important. Inviting others in, we talked about that. We hadn't even gotten to that point yet. It had been probably a couple of years back before we were even to the point where it's like we now need to be a missionary family. How can we do that? How can we help others? Because we're starting to see some of the fruits, which is thankfully, there, and now we want to be able to invite others and have our children invite their friends in too.
Yeah, and you learn how to be creative over time. So there was a lot of things we let our kids, now our kids like to go to different churches. They love to try different things, come into the city, see different kinds of things, certain pastors they like, and I'm all for that because if they're pursuing something inside of them, I want them to find out, what's that hum inside them, what's God drawing them to, and let's go do that. And then we take that and we talk about it. You know, what did God do there? What are you hearing there? What's enjoyable? What are you bringing to Mass, right? Sometimes we don't think about what we bring to Mass, but you need to be bringing something and putting it on that altar, and what is that going to be? Yeah, that and so forth. So a couple things about what we've learned. Making a family agreement about participation. Like, you need to sit down and get sort of assurances, and everyone bought in. Like, you agree, right? We're going to do this. We're going to do this, right? So everybody's on the same page. It's a big deal. It's not just mom and dad's plan. It's the family plan. You have a say. What you're really going to do, we tell you, and you're gonna be a part of this stuff, and you agree to do it. Make it a routine. You don't get off your routines. Like, this is what we do every Sunday. It's difficult because kids want to spend the night at their friend's house on Saturday. There's all kinds of sporting events going on. But you have to, like, say Sunday is how we identify ourselves as a family. It's that important. It's one of the most important things that we do, and that's what we do. Well, so you got to kind of stick with that.
And to jump into that, as Michael said before too, it's like you're a Sunday people. So Sunday, it is the Source and Summit, our Mass, our Sunday Mass is where we go to be fed, but we are a Sunday people throughout the week too, so we're always looking for those opportunities to reiterate that and bring it back to our being a Sunday person and a Eucharistic people.
Yeah, and I think the key to all of these things that we discovered is that our personal relationship with God and our shared experience in faith is at the center of our little domestic church. Without this working, that doesn't work well. So it's one thing to be an individual who's a disciple, and you can be very comfortable with that. It's another thing to learn how to be of one flesh, and how to be together as one, and how to do things together as one. It's a big challenge. I mean, it's a big challenge in our family because we're really good at being independent. But when it comes to the family, and what God's really calling us to, this deep union and communion, has to do with this intimate connection and working as one. And so we find over time, we both have strengths and weaknesses that we help one another, help each other grow. And then we end up being sort of like the non-negotiable front of the family. There's no getting around us. This is the way it is. And they also see us loving one another. And when faith comes out of love, when your kids see faith in love, it's the most powerful example of your faith. Not the obedience, not the you have to's, but out of love. Like, mom and dad really love each other. Or they really love us, and they see that. And for whatever reason, it's particularly true for men. When children, older children and younger children, see their fathers leading their family that way, it has statistically the greatest impact for your kids to maintain their faith. It's just that's just the way it is. And one example I heard recently was, like, fathers tend to be the first other. So for children, mom tends to be the one that they're, like, most intimate with. They're the closest to. When they're very little, they don't differentiate themselves. They see themselves as one. But the father is the first one that sort of is able to take them out into the world, to show them that this can go from here to there. And it's one of the role of fathers, to take them out and show the faith.
Well, and one of the things that can be challenging too, I mean, because we've been married for 27 years, and we haven't always, it hasn't always been that easy for us to. It wasn't always that easy for us to do this together, and quite honestly, there was a point in time where Michael's been instrumental in being the faith leader, and he had to look at me and go, what are we doing here with our family? As far as, and help whether it's a husband or a wife, and you may not always have that mesh where it's like you two are working as one, and the love and the faith that either the husband or wife can continue to give, not only to their children, but to their spouse, is really important as far as helping establish the whole family tradition and being a Sunday people.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily like just husbands and wife with children. I mean, grandparents and uncles and brothers become the witnesses that are needed in that extended community to provide the witness for the kids. Like, that's the critical role of older people, aunts and uncles, grandparents, is to pick up this torch to live out the faith so they can see it in you. So that when they spend time with you, all that stuff gets reinforced again. The prayer, the Sunday meeting, the scripture, the importance of it, right? That's why that extended family is so important. One of the things that we really still struggle with is no community. We live in this world where we're trying to live this out, but we're doing this in isolation. Even a lot of Catholic families balk at even what we're doing. Like, we can't do that. And I look at them and say, well, what choice do you have? Like, this is life-giving. What are you doing? You know, but it's too hard. You know, it's too hard to tell your kids no, or it's too hard to move in this kind of direction. So it becomes very isolating when you don't have community. And it's one of the great experiences of extended family who can come in like yourselves and be the mentors to even maybe the younger couples or even just the family to help raise their children with them, you know, to take them places, give the parents a break maybe, or whatever, right? But to be another witness to the family of Christ and the truth of what they're doing. Briefly, just some of the challenges. I just want to mention the first one, and then you could run through some of these. Is you're really creating a culture change in your family, right? And culture changes are hard. If you've ever tried to like change your diet or start working out, it usually fails like in a couple of weeks. It's a very hard thing to do to start changing the culture. So that's why it's important to have the heads of the family, even if you're single, make some decisions about what you're going to do and stick to your routines and trust God as you're going along with it. It's a very challenging thing, and you're probably going to have a lot of disappointments and pushback sometimes because it can be very frustrating. I was in a meeting today with one of my coworkers, and we started to talk about this kind of stuff as a way to present to the Archdiocese as like a new way for families to have a new culture. And she broke down in tears. And the reason she's like, I'm hearing what you're saying, but we're having a really hard time living this, and I feel all alone in it. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard that story from really good Catholic families where they just feel completely isolated. They feel alone in what they're doing. They feel overwhelmed and overworked. And they're just saying, like, I'm drowning here. Can someone help me? Don't tell me something else to do. Like, drop the line and really help me out. And I think the answer to that is always going to be Christ. It's like you got to come and receive the grace you need to live, right? And that's why we need extended family and everyone else who has that extra spare time to come and be lifelines, to be that extra instrument in the hands of Christ. Good?
Yeah.
But a lot of these things, things change over time, and you got to constantly readjust. The kids change, their life changes. You know that. You figure them out when they're 4, and then they turn 5. It's like, what the heck? I just figured out 4, now they're 5, And then you figure out 5s and they're a teenager. You're like, what the heck? How am I supposed to do this, right? So you're kind of always in a flow. It's like you get comfortable and you get a method, and then you figure out, okay, they're going to go in a different direction. It requires new techniques and new opportunities. The benefit to this, though, is that we've actually seen the fruit of the work when they're younger show up when they're a little bit older. So it does get a little bit easier. Oops, sorry. Let's talk about some of the good things, right? Some of the joys. What are some of the joys? It's funny, so we were preparing for this presentation, and Shawn and I were sitting at the table and we're talking about it, and she just had like a couple of bad days, and it was late at night, and I'm like, so Shawn, so why are we doing this? What are some of the joys? And she was like, I don't know. Right? Because sometimes it feels that way. You work really, really hard at all these things, and you're pushing and pulling, and they're pushing and pulling against you, right? And it's like, why are we doing this?
Well, we have a house full of not teenagers, but 20-year-old women right now. We have 3, our girls, and then our son's wife is with us now. And so there's a lot of emotion and drama that is going on in our home. And you sit there sometimes, you're going, oh my goodness, how are we going to do this? And just every day is different because different times. Teenagers don't wake up until like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and people want to have dinner at 3 a.m. in the morning when everybody else is trying to sleep. So it's crazy. It's a struggle, but it's also a joy because time is short. Time is short when we have this with our kids. It goes by so fast, and it can be frustrating, but it's an opportunity. We went on a vacation. And my husband's like, let's just take every moment in. All the arguments that our kids had, all the frustration that they had, or gave or whatever, take it all in because it's only a moment in time, and it's our opportunity to spend with them. So the challenges, the joys far outweigh the challenges many times.
Yeah, and you see them evolve and change and struggle with their faith and all that kind of stuff. You see God showing up. You know that you're being co-responsible in the mission of what Christ is asking us to do for them. So it gives you that strength to keep going because you know you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. I don't have any regrets as a parent. Maybe one, that I didn't teach them enough gratitude. If I could go back and do anything, it would be to teach them to be more grateful for what they have. But it feels really good as a parent to know that I put a lot of work into this, and I'm good. You know what? It's on God's hands, and they have to now appropriate the faith. They have to claim it for themselves. They can't have mine. They have to go do it. We've given them the example, and they have to take a hold of the reins and have it themselves. But it's cool. I can't tell you how good it feels as a parent to see them actually go do that. You're like, high five, this is great, I see them doing it, and it's an awesome thing.
Or even to bring their friends to church. When they have their friends going, well, can I go to church with you and your family? That's awesome. Yes.
You know, we looked on the pew and all these kids we don't know. I'm like, who are these kids? I don't know.
That's awesome.
It's like a weird thing. All right. So, in closing, it can seem very daunting. It's also, I want to just emphasize again, this is not just for family. This is for a way of life for all of us who are like people who are called to live in this world in a lay way. To take the life that we experience on Sunday, to put it in our hearts, and to learn how to see the example of Christ, to take it in and to become that, and share it with somebody else. I'll give you a quick example. We just had Epiphany Sunday. And part of the Epiphany, if you think about how beautiful it is about Christ being at the center of this holy night, right? The simplicity of his life, you know, the joy, and who gets invited? These very humble people, or these wise guys or wise women who come, you know, who are leaving everything behind and traveling light because they're seeking something. They're desperate in a way. They want to know truth. And they're bringing gifts for what? For right relationship, for the proper worship, because they want to be in line with what's good and true. And I hear that, my heart starts to sing, because that's what I want to do. I want to be on the journey to kind of see Christ, to go there, to pack lightly, to take what's necessary, right? So then I start to appropriate that in my life, and then I say, well, how do I give this to my kids, or how do I live it out? How am I going to be peaceful and a center in my home like Christ? To draw people to myself, my kids, to bless my kids, to watch their journey, to encourage them to be on a journey, right? So this is how it works, and this is how we spend our week, trying to unpack what the Lord has given us and to try to live it out. What I'd like to offer in closing is, you've heard of 52 Sundays?
Yes.
Yes? Does anybody have a copy of it? Nobody has? Okay, so I brought a couple copies, and the reason...
I had my hand up.
You okay? The reason we wrote this was to provide a basic roadmap on how to do this exact same thing. Is if you can't think of what the questions might be to ask your kids. If you don't know what dinner to make that night, if you don't know where to go, you can look it up. And on that Sunday, the way we've organized it is so that you have the readings for that day, or at least the gospel. You have an idea like what at least the gospel has to say in terms of the context. You have the saint for that week that you can talk about. You have some fun questions. You have a meal. You have a direction. So it's all there. So if you couldn't think of anything to do, you can take this book and actually start to use it as an example of how to incorporate that in your life, just to get started. Okay? And somehow, magically, Shawn's going to give a couple copies away. I also have one last giveaway. It is the Unleash the Gospel magazine. Has anybody seen this at all? Besides Father, put your hand down. Right? This is a particularly great issue for two reasons. Why are you laughing? Because it's all about family. And there's a great article on page 24 written by some guy that's really good. So I wrote an article in here too. So there's an article in here about our family and the experience I had that I haven't told a story about that's really good. We'll give this copy away too for somebody who'd like to have. So what I like to do is end in prayer, do some Q&A, and then we'll save this for last. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So why don't we do Q&A first?
Sure.
Does that sound good?
Sure.
All right.